Welcome to Conversations about Creativity and Eco-Social Change. Today I'm with Tania Perez-Bustos, who is an Associate Professor at the National University of Colombia. Tania, could I invite you to tell us about your project Remendar lo Nuevo, or Mending the New? I'm really interested in the kind of tension in the title. Could you tell us a little bit about what it means to mend the new?
The name of the project, because like the idea of new, it was related to reconciliation. So reconciliation is something new that comes, and it's also an imposed discourse. So it's something that is mandated. People has to reconcile, and it's also assumed that peace is a peace. Peace is leaving behind something. And in cases like Colombia, and I guess in many other societies, it doesn't work like that. It's war is sometimes and conflict is an ongoing situation. So when you bring a discourse that is new and you're asked to reconcile, but there are still things happening in terms of conflict, so how can you reconcile? With whom? Why do I have to? So that was the idea of something new that has to be amended somehow, in part because we haven't considered what are the meanings that people attribute to this mandate, and the affections that involve that mandate. So we started working with one of the purposes of the project was why people are documenting war with this platform, with this material form. Why this way? Why not this other way? Why with what this way of documenting does to them, so materially speaking as well. And we wanted to do that using, let's say, artifacts that were at the same time built with materials close to communities, but at the same time components that were perhaps alien to them. Very basic things in terms of using LEDs and cables and embroidering them, or one could call them electronic embroidery or things like that. We work with four communities of women mostly. They are Afro-Colombian or white mestizo women. All of them have been victims of internal displacement of different sorts. All of them document war using textile practices. They have also moved away from documenting what happened to documenting what they would like to happen. So there is an issue of time as well, not just I live this, but I want to live this as well. So something more related to hope and future, let's say, in terms of storytelling. So we started doing this, and there were many explorations that were done with them. Some of those explorations were also thought not only with communities, but also with people who are artists or designers or digital practitioners and political scientists. So we created mingas, we call it mingas, sort of makeathons, if you want, spaces for exploring the way textile materialities and digital materialities could support or not each other, and the implications of that, and how can that contribute to create testimonies of reconciliation. So we created many spaces of exploration, common exploration, and that was very important because it created a sense of commonality. A sense of commonality not just between communities. Communities understood that each one of them were part of something bigger. And that was done through these artifacts. So one of these artifacts, for example, was a bag that it had some components that when it traveled to a place, and at that place people would open the bag and put some gifts to the other people they did not know who they were, and they will send it to the other community. And when the community opened this bag, the people who had sent it will receive an SMS saying, hey, your gift has been received. So there was excitement, oh, the gift had been received. And so what the things that were into the bag were, there were there were seeds, or there were recipes or stories. So they shared stories, they planted seeds, they ate things that were cooked with the recipes of the others. So there was a growing sense of commonality that allowed us actually to move away from a discourse approach to research in terms of asking questions and people answering them, and more creating spaces for common reflection.
That sounds like a really powerful approach to create these shared spaces of commonality and reflection. Could I ask what was kind of specific about the use of the textile practice? What did the practice of making kind of add as we're sort of moving away from discourse or talking and towards a material practice of making?
So in the case of the textile materiality, the softness of the materiality and the tools that you use evoke particular atmospheres of making in which people listen differently. I don't know if you have ever done anything textile. I don't know if you have ever knitted or crocheted or embroidered or something like that, or you have ever seen someone doing it. If you have ever seen someone doing it, you see that someone has an inclination, and the time that inclination produces is different than the chronological time. If you have a threaded needle, I used to have always a thread needle. If you have a thread needle, then the needle goes, you have a round tablet with some fabric in it, you are holding it close to you, so it's always attached to you. The needle, it's into the fabric, then it goes out and inside you, so the movements are always reflexive, goes out and goes to you. So, and that creates some sort of inner reflection, and people say it all the time. When I'm doing this, I am calmer. When I'm doing this, I listen better. And when you do that with others, it's as I said, it creates a sort of atmosphere, a textile atmosphere, in which you are listening with the bodies of the others that are also making. So you're listening better. There is a togetherness that creates this process. And this is not only me saying this, these communities have done this all the time. I mean, women get together to embroider, get together to knit, to share. Those spaces are usually also related with shareness. I mean, you share materials, you share stories, you share practices, you share knowledges. So all those things are happening there. And when you bring into that practice components that, as I said previously, are alien to communities, it also brings a little bit of surprise. So people say, wow, I didn't know I could do this. So then they start thinking, well, the cable is a little bit too hard if I want to put it into this fabric that is soft. So how can I actually make something soft, sustain something hard? So those type of reflections come. So they start thinking about those like silly binaries of being together and being apart, being soft and being hard, sustaining one thing and the other. How can I cut this without? So those ways of understanding the small, I call it gestures, like textile gestures related with the making of cutting or mending or unraveling things or composing, bringing things together. So all those small gestures that are part of this practice, in the scene of the reflection, in this atmosphere of reflection, start to create a way of understanding, well, who I am, what am I bringing together? You know, it's like material making. In the same way, it is connected to people who are being making. The people are being made in the making as well. Are being made in the making. They are making.
That's so interesting, Tania, that kind of people are working on themselves and their relationships and kind of connecting past and future in those practices. I wonder if you could say something about people's relationships with their environments. In our project, we're really interested in eco-social sustainability. and kind of thinking about how creative practices can help people kind of remake connections with yeah, the land and the living systems that they depend on.
All these women are internally displaced. So that means that they have been dispossessed by the land they belong to. And these women used to live out of those lands. So you have the dispossession is related necessarily with territories that you are going to long forever after that. Territories that are attached to practices. So these women were peasants, so they grew food and they are displaced to a city, so they cannot grow that anymore. So you have recipes lost, you have knowledge is lost, you have healing practices lost because they are related to the territory you were dispossessed to or with. I don't know. So that's one thing. They are documenting that with textile. So when they, and that's very beautiful. So some women, for example, in the Choco region, they one of the pieces that they documented before we arrived was it was a piece that documents the names of every one of the people that were killed in a massacre inside a church. So that's around 85, if I don't recall wrong, around 80 names that they said, well, this is a way of saying these are the people who were lived. And when they do that, when you take the time to stitch beautifully in a beautiful typography the name of someone, then you stay with that name for, I don't know, 4 hours, 5 hours in that silent. It's very meditative. It's very powerful in terms of what it does. But besides that, then the piece has a lot of fauna. Then you have flowers of the region, and then you have animals, and you have also trades of the region. You have people fishing, or you have people cooking. So they I don't know what's the word for this in English. You beautify this horrible thing that happened, recognizing that the losses of this possession, of this war, is not only human lives, but also territories in danger. And when you do that through textile practice, you are creating memory. You're creating a document that you have made, stating that, and you have stayed time with it. So it's a way of remembering. This is also lost, and I don't want it to be lost. I want others to know that these birds, animals, practices also happen in this place. So on one side, documentation is related to that, as I said before, and it's a way of documenting losses that are more than human, let's say, and that's related with the type of communities we are working with. So the war is always more than social. I mean, there is an ecology of war. One could say war, and there is an Iraqi scholar working in Rutgers, I think. His name is Omar Debachi, and he talks about the ecology of war. And in countries like us, it's like, where does war stop? I mean, where there is no war around you, war is everywhere. But the ecology of war, it's also related with a war that is related with ecology. So in fact, yes, all these and in the case of communities in Chocó and also in Bolivar, this possession is also related to ways of extractivism that have imposed practices in the communities, which somehow detach them to, as I said before, to knowledges and practices that are profoundly constitutive to them. So it's not just, environment in the sense of something that is there, but it's something that is part of who they are, and they are being dispossessed of that as well. It's not just rivers poisoned, or the creation of a monoculture of palm that is not allowing people to grow their own food. It's not only that type of intervention, but also what that is create what type of losses that is creating as well. And when they document textually, they are creating memory of those things that are being lost. So they create documents of those more than human losses due to an ecological war, let's say